Good evening. Today we are going to be installing our new EVGA RTX 2080 Ti XC edition, and it has supposedly RGB lighting somehow. I did get a used one, which, you know, take that as you may, but I got it on Amazon, so if I have any problem with it, they'll take it right back. And it's EVGA, so again, any problems beyond like the first 30 or 45 days, EVGA is really good about their warranty department, and they would have to give me another one and or, repair or replace, but they've always been really good with me in the past about cross shipping and so forth, so I'm not really worried about having any problems with it. It was a couple $100s off retail, so it was worth it to me to go ahead and pick it up. And like I said, if I have a problem, I'll just send it back. But this is the flagship GPU we're going to be playing with. I kind of wanted to get a For the Win 3 edition card, but they're quite a bit more expensive, and it's like impossible to get damn near anything right now, especially those. Like, they're $1,350 and they're never available. Like, people must be buying them within the first like minute or two they go on sale. So I've never seen one available online, and thus I just opted to get this when it became available on Amazon here. I think it was 2 days ago I ordered it. So anyways, let me get this box open and we'll see what I've got with it. Because it's used, you can see the box has just been taped up again. And actually, whoever had it put the case badge on the freaking box, so much for that. I won't get that. I don't really care about case badges that much anyway, but still, just like, what the hell. But I'm going to go ahead and open this up and be right back. Alright, so we got the card out of the box. As some people have stated, the aesthetics of it may or may not impress you. Personally, I don't think it looks too bad, but the clear plastic I can kind of take or leave. I don't know. I guess, like I say, that's just a personal preference that you may or may not have. Strangely enough, I found the only two things in the box that came with it, which according to the site I think is all you're supposed to get, is another case badge in there. So why one was stuck to the box, I don't know. I wonder if the person that bought this card and returned it had two of them and decided that they only wanted one, and for some reason stuck their other one in the box or something. It's hard to say. I don't really know why they did that. And then there is an HDMI to DVI adapter cable that comes with it. So they, at least provide you some way to hook up to an older monitor if you're still using something with a DVI port. You get, by the looks of things, you get the USB-C port, and I got 1, 2, 3 display ports and an HDMI 2.0B port, similar to the 2070 that I've got. I think they're pretty much the same layout, honestly, in that regard. And you got your NVLink connector up here, which of course is different than the old SLI connector. So you can see, like, the old SLI was like a finger here and a finger here. Now you got this long one and a little tiny stubby thing here. I don't really have any reason for that right now. I don't know if I'll ever do SLI with this. Knowing myself, I probably will, because I always like to have the most ridiculous amount of hardware I can get in a machine. But I may wait for next year and see if the prices come down a little bit, or if I can get one from somebody on Craigslist or something to even out and get a second card. Hopefully I can get two of the same kind, so I'm not screwing around with that too much. I also think maybe, I don't know if this is considered a reference board design or not, but hopefully they'll do like a EVGA hybrid water cooler like I have on my 1080 Ti, and then I can maybe, like NZXT's G12 mounting bracket could be used on this, and then I could put like a water cooler on it instead. Because like I say, I don't know, I don't dislike the way it looks, but I'm not like a huge fan of it either. It looks okay. You get two 8-pin power connections required for it, and apparently the lighting on this is the RGB lighting that can be controlled through their precision software. You can tell it to like change different colors or have it specifically like a static color of one kind. The plastic's still on it, so again, I can't imagine that the person that bought this prior to me even used it. It doesn't look like it was ever even plugged in or turned on. There's no scratches, and everything was still in place except for one DisplayPort cover, so they may or may not have actually hooked it up and tested it out. I can't really be sure. But the specs of the card are 4,352 CUDA cores, 1,635 megahertz boost clock. It's 444.7 gigatexel fill rate. There's 11 gigs of GDDR6 on a 352-bit memory interface, 616 gigabits per second of bandwidth. It uses the ICX2 version cooling system. Like I said, it has the RGB lighting, and it apparently uses 250 watts TDP. So, you probably need a decent power supply if you're going to overclock it at all, plus your processor and whatnot. I'm going to put this in my system with my Threadripper 1920X, and that's like, I think, 160 or 165 watts, maybe 180 watt processor. So, I mean, I got 1200 watt supply, so it's fine, but just bear in mind if your processor is a little hungry as well to think about these things. If you're going to overclock much, you probably want at least a minimum of like an 850 watt supply if you're going to overclock both things in a fairly high end system. And apparently, lastly, the only thing I can never seem to find out how many cores, like the tensor cores and then like the RTX cores that these things have. Supposedly this card has 544 tensor cores, but I wasn't able to figure out the number of RTX cores. I'm not even sure 100% if those are two separate things or if they're the same thing. I think they're separate, but it just seems like nobody's sites are listing those kinds of specs. So I'm like kind of looking through Google to figure it out, but it is what it is. Anyways, I guess I'll go ahead and take my 1080 Ti out of my system and get ready to put this card in. We'll see kind of how they compare. So I'll be right back. So I've got my 1080 Ti out of the system, and you can see I've got my hybrid cooler on that. So I kind of expect the temps from this thing to probably be a little bit worse than this, but with only one card in the system, it shouldn't be too bad. And my case is freaking huge, so there's a lot of airflow in there, and it won't be an issue for that. One thing I wanted to show you guys, which is I think kind of cool looking about this card. So you may not care for the aesthetics of the fan or the clear plastic on it, but I think that the backplate on it looks kind of nice. Again, that is of course personal preference, but I kind of think it looks pretty good. So got that compared to the older kind of standard backplate on this. I think having holes cut into it like that probably is not a bad idea. It probably allows some heat to escape from the card a little bit more. But I guess next up I got to put it in the system and we got to give it a try. I pretty much, after making sure this thing works correctly, we'll probably be throwing this on Craigslist to get some of my money back out of it. I'm going on vacation next week, and it would be cool to have an extra maybe $550, $600 out of this if I can get it. We'll see. If people don't want to pay enough for it, maybe I'll try to find another use for it, or trade it for something. We'll have to wait and see what people say. But 1080 Ti's, I think, are pretty much out of stock everywhere right now. I think that they're obviously not making them anymore, and that the stock on them is starting to run out a little bit. And they're more powerful than an RTX 2080, and the 2080s cost like between $700 to $900 usually. So anybody who can get one of these, for less than that or a similar price is probably doing okay for themselves, because once they're completely out of stock, I mean, on Amazon right now, you can't even get these unless you want to pay like $1,000, and that's not even for a water-cooled one. So hopefully I can get a pretty good chunk of change out of it and, help pay off a good portion of this. But like I said, I'll probably use part of the money for my vacation because I'm going to go hunting here next week. Opening day is the 15th, and I'm leaving on the 13th to drive up to Michigan. It's about a 7.5 hour drive, and go hang out with my dad and my uncle for however long we do it. It just depends on if we get any deer or not. Anyways, kind of segueing here. I'll be right back once I get this card installed and we can see kind of what it does. Be right back. Alright, so I've got the fan sitting at about 65%, and it's really not loud hardly at all. Hardly even hear it speak of, really. And with, if I put the cover back on the case, it'll be even quieter. But you can kind of see I've got the lights set up to kind of work in sync with the rest of my case, which kind of just fluctuates between red and white on this particular build. And looks alright. Nothing too ridiculous about the design one way or the other. It's not horrible. Let me get back to my desk here and we'll look at some temps and maybe we'll run a benchmark. One sec. Okay, so you can see the temp is idling at 35 degrees with the fans at 65%. And from where I'm sitting at right now, you can barely even hear that. It's not very loud, which is nice. We can try turning that up a bit and see how crazy it gets. Well, that's a little louder, isn't it? Let's see if the temp gets affected much. I mean, at idle, it's not doing anything anyway. Temp really isn't changing. Okay. I'm going to put it back down because that's really irritatingly loud. Back to 66, 65. Like I said, that's pretty freaking quiet. Like I say, as soon as I put the cover back on the case, I probably won't be able to hear it very well, which is cool. So if you had a case with any kind of sound dampening, you really probably wouldn't be able to hear it at all. So pretty quiet, but we're sitting at idle right now. I guess what I need to do is fire up like 3D Mark or something, Time Spy again, and we'll compare to what I was getting with a previous system with the 1080 Ti's that I had before, and see how much better this thing does. Hopefully it works correctly. So far everything's been doing the right thing. But like I say, this is technically a used card, so who knows if something will go wrong with it or not. But I will be right back. Alright, so I just got a couple comparison scores here on 3D Mark Firestrike. I couldn't seem to get it to run Time Spy. It just kept closing itself for some reason as soon as I would, like it wasn't even getting into the first benchmark. It would start to load the little progress bar and immediately close itself, so I don't know what the deal is with that. It might be because I'm using the OSD and Precision X1. I'll have to play with it and try to get it to work, but for now, whatever. So the first test there on the left is the current setup with the 2080 Ti scoring 21,699 points, and that's using the 1920X at basically stock frequency. The CPU's at stock. You know, I didn't overclock it at all. It's just boosting and doing its thing, but it's not anything crazy. But for some reason, it got pretty good on the physics score and the physics test. It seems to have done better than anything else, which is sort of interesting. And then the average frames per second in the first test was about 168. Second test, 133. And the combined test, about 31.1. The second one here is with the 1080 Ti, and I don't know if that was overclocked or not. Unfortunately, I don't have it doesn't ever show the correct information here, but like your clock frequencies and shit, you almost have to like make notes on it yourself, or it doesn't really retain that information. But that was with, you can see the number of difference. Graphics test 1, 136 frames a second. Graphics test 2, 113. So a pretty good jump over the 1080 Ti for sure. The third test here is with a pair of 1080 Ti's on the same system, and that one of course scored, you know, a bit higher, 23,828. But I mean, that's two cards. I don't know if they're overclocked or not, but the first test didn't. I mean, the first card, the 2080 Ti, didn't do much worse than those two combined, and that's with stock. So overclocked, at least in this test, it looks like I could probably get it to do about as well, if not better, than the pair of 1080 Ti's. Again, in this particular test, but this is a pretty low resolution test. I think Firestrike only run at like 1080p. I think the higher there's the Firestrike Extreme, and then like the 4K Ultra Extreme Edition that can push these cards a little bit harder. So I think I will go ahead and run one of those and be right back. I think I'll run the high end one, assuming it won't crap out like Time Spy was. Be right back. So again, as with like the regular Time Spy, I tried running like Time Spy Extreme, and it's crashing too. So I don't know what's going on with the Time Spy benchmarks, but the regular Firestrike benchmarks seem to be working fine. So this is the Firestrike Ultra or Extreme or whatever, the high-end Firestrike test. Ultra, yeah. And so the first one there on the left again is the 2080 Ti. The second one is a pair of 1080 Ti's. And the third one is actually 3 R9 Fury cards back in my old i7 5930K that I used to run. And actually, so three R9 Furies beat out the 2080 Ti in this particular test, but they're horrible in actual gaming scenarios. But in a synthetic benchmark, 3 of them was enough. But still, for a single card, it did pretty well. I don't know, I might screw around with Ryzen Master and try different settings with my CPU and see if I can get better results out of this. Seems like it did okay, but with no overclocking or whatever, it's actually still doing, comparatively well to a pair of 1080 Ti's. So I guess next up I'll try a couple games and see what kind of frame rates I get. But I shall be right back, and we'll try maybe Witcher 3. And this is not a 4K monitor, so I'm going to have to run at 3440 by 1440. I want to hook up my 4K panel to it later and see how well it does in games at true 4K, everything cranked up. But we can try ultra wide resolution and see how a few games work. So I shall be right back. Alright, so I got Witcher 3 going here. Everything's on maximum settings, including NVIDIA Hairworks and Hairworks anti-aliasing and everything else is turned up to 100%. The frame rate counter is in the upper right there. You can see this is in Novigrad too, which is one of the, pretty much the most populated area of the game with buildings and so forth, and it seems to be hanging out. It's dropped into the 70s. I mean, a couple times running around. I can't really play the game and and hold my phone at the same time, unfortunately. And if I tried to do this with the shadow play recording, I would lose frame rates, and then it would be recording in ultra wide, which then I'd have to convert and make, whatever, it makes it more difficult. So, anyways, it's doing a pretty good job. Again, this is all stock frequencies and so forth. I can't get the OSD to work in some games for some reason. Like the new Precision program should have an OSD in the upper left-hand corner showing like the GPU usage and so forth, and it's not doing that. So, I don't know what the deal is with that. I think the temperatures have been running pretty well though. Let's see if we can figure out where our temp is. So it says the max was 69 degrees, which isn't bad. And actually in the benchmark that I was running, the max only got up to, well, it's still going up. So it's still rendering the game even though it's tabbed out. I'm not sure how high it's going to get. I can always turn up the fans a little bit though. Like, see, they're only at 65. 70 isn't like amazing, but it's not horrible. Now, why is that not synchronized, I wonder? Try turning it up a little bit. And my heater just turned on here. Sorry about the extra noise. But it's drowning out the sound of the fans in the game, so there you go. Actually kind of surprised these are running as hot as they are because touring cards are supposed to run, at pretty good temps. And honestly, this isn't like that super impressive in terms of temperatures. The fans on this may not be like the most amazing ever design, but I would have thought that they'd probably do a little bit better job. Let's see here. And like I say, it kind of drops into the 70s here and there, but for the most part it's not. And I made sure to shut G-Sync off because G-Sync will screw with your frame rate. Excuse me. I'll go ahead and load something else up here. Let's see what else it does in a different game. Be right back. So here we got some numbers for Far Cry 5 benchmark. This is again an ultra wide as opposed to 4K, but minimum was 59 frames per second, average of 79, and a maximum of 105 frames per second. That's with everything cranked up to maximum. Anti-aliasing, nothing's off is VSync. Everything else cranked up, and definitely did a pretty good job on that. I don't have any. I don't remember the results I ever got, with previous card setups. So I'm not really gonna throw my 1080 Ti back in and verify it, but definitely seems to do a pretty good job for a single card. It does seem like there's maybe a little bit of stuttering going on. I kind of almost wonder if I should do like another fresh driver install or something and just fiddle with it. But that did a pretty good job. I'll see if I can find one other game that'll give it a good run for its money, and then we'll call it good. Be right back. So this is Batman Arkham Knight, and actually I'm running reshade on this with a, so a graphical mod is running, which will affect the frame rate, and it's still got, it says a minimum of 40, but whenever the test first starts running, it's like there's this little hitch that kind of starts it off on a low note, but then it goes right up to where it should be. But it was averaging 76 and maxed out at 106 frames a second. So this being a game that when it launched ran like complete dog shit on like any system that you try to run it on. So they did, pretty good card. I definitely would like to try it on 4K. This is with everything maxed out again, including like all the GameWorks features, like the physics stuff that they had enabled for this game. Like there's a lot of smoke effects and like blowing debris around, like pieces of paper and so forth, that they did a good job of making look realistic. But that said, yeah, I think everything's working pretty well. Let me see what the temp was sitting at, but it seems like it did a pretty good job. Yeah, I mean, well, maybe this game, it's not really rendering anything heavy in the game right now. That's probably why the temp is coming back down, but I think the temp never really got past, the highest I've ever gotten anything was 71 degrees. I think that was in, what the hell was the first game I think that was in Far Cry 5 benchmark, but I could be wrong. But never got above 71. And in actual benchmark programs, it stayed in the 60s. So really, the temp on this thing is pretty good. And what I think I'll do eventually, if EVGA releases like a hybrid kit for the 2080 Ti cards, I will probably put liquid cooling on this to get the temp down to a reasonable level. Maybe. We'll see. I think two of these in the case together, though, would get pretty hot, so I don't know, you probably would want to run liquid cooling on them if you're going to do that too. Just adds way more expense to it, so I don't know if I'll do it or not. But it's doing a pretty good job. If anybody has any questions, I guess, go ahead and ask them in the comment section. Otherwise, I appreciate anybody who watched the video, and maybe give me a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel if you feel so inclined. Appreciate you watching. Have a great one. Bye.